Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H virtual event space. You are tuned into Leica Stories. Today, we are having a conversation with photographer Jeremy Saffer. Jeremy, what's going on, man?
How's it going?
It is going wonderful. I got to say, I do this every day. I don't often get nervous, but when you have a wonderfully talented photographer on who has images, it's like I knew about your work before I knew about you personally. And that's an awesome thing. I love having people on that have motivated me and inspired me as a photographer. So first of all, I just want to say that a huge thank you to Leica for bringing you on. This isn't street photography, Jeremy. We're not doing
It isn't.
Leica street photography.
We're not. No, we're doing portraiture
We're doing
and photo shoots
portraiture,
and concerts and all that fun stuff.
all
But
that
thank you
fun
so
stuff.
much. I really appreciate it.
No, look, I'm so grateful to have you on, and I want to get the conversation started here by sending a special welcome out to everybody joining us on our main B&H Facebook page over there, to everybody joining us on YouTube as well. We don't normally take questions on these interviews, but if you guys do have something you want to know, throw it in. We'll see if we can mix it in somewhere in the mix here. That's what we're about here, is getting the information out that you guys want to know. And what better way to get it started, Jeremy, by talking about how you got into music itself? I know we're talking about photography, but a lot of what you do is music related. So how did it all begin for you?
Music I've been into since I was little. I know there's pictures my mom has of me like 3 years old with a ukulele singing like Puff the Magic Dragon, using the fireplace mantle as like a stage kind of thing or whatever you call it. But I first got into metal kind of stuff when I was like 9 or 10 because my not next door neighbor, but kind of close to next door neighbor was into metal. He was a little bit older than I was, and he kind of showed me, Metallica, Megadeth, Pantera. So like I saw Metallica when I was super young, and I knew Enter Sandman, but I didn't know much else beyond that. And it was Metallica, Guns N' Roses, Suicidal, Danzig, which was quite the lineup for someone who didn't know any of those bands at that time. But it just kind of went from there, and I got into the more extreme metal, the more underground metal stuff, and just kept going from there. I was in a bunch of bands, and as my band would open up for bigger bands, I would take pictures of those bands that I would open up for, and that's kind of how the photography thing kind of started.
Interesting. I was going to ask that about how it led in, because I know that you are a huge fan of movies, cinema, and that's been a
Yeah,
motivating factor in your work. But was it movies or music that you first it got you in? Was it watching movies that got you into photography, or was it through music that really got you in?
definitely music for sure. Because what I would do is, I was always going to concerts, I was always playing shows, taking pictures, and I started shooting all the shows locally, which for me, thankfully, I'm so lucky to live in Western Massachusetts where our local shows were always, Hatebreed, Shadows Fall, Killswitch Engage, all those bands you know, who played here every week. And so the dude who ran all the shows in Western Massachusetts started having me shoot all his shows. So I was like, cool, I can go to shows for free. And then he worked for a bigger company called Mass Concerts, who put on the shows at the Palladium, the Webster, some bigger shows in Lowell and like Warped Tour, all that kind of stuff. And I became their photographer as well. So it was just going to shows for free and taking pictures and having fun with it. And it just kind of snowballed into, I went to Berkeley School of Music for music production and engineering. I always kind of wanted to be a musician, and it kind of sucked the passion out of playing music, whereas I was skipping homework to shoot shows for fun. And when I kind of hit that fork in the road where I wasn't doing so well at Berkeley, my passion wasn't there anymore, I went back to Scott Lee, who was the person who got me into it. I was like, yeah, dude, I don't know what to do. I've been here a couple semesters. I'm not liking it. He's like, what do you like to do? Take pictures. Like, do that. And it never really dawned on me until he said that was something I can do professionally and not just for fun. And so I just kind of ran with it. I immediately started touring with bands that I had relationships with, and went to school at the Hallmark Institute of Photography, and went from there. I jumped off tour to go there, jumped right back on tour after, and started doing more portrait work from there.
That's awesome. I mean, you talked about with music, there's this fine line between passion and work. And some people are afraid to cross those boundaries because you're like, well, I don't want to take something that's a passion of mine and make it work because then I'll lose the passion. Has there been
Mhm.
any of that for you with photography? Because it's become, I mean, everything's so tightly wound between the music and the photography. Those are two passions of yours. And now it's work for you. Is there something, how do you keep that boundary from really spilling over, or keep it something where it's still a passion?
So I found that in music, if I'm playing metal, I'm happy. If I'm playing jazz or blues or, anything else that I'm not into, I can't do it because my heart's not into it. I'm not like the type of player that can do that. In photography, especially music photography, it's so all encapsulating. It's like you can do product photography, shooting guitar, shooting, you know, clothing lines, shooting all that kind of stuff. You can do event photography, shooting concerts. You can do portraiture, doing photo shoots. You can be doing weddings, shooting weddings of people in bands, which I do quite often. And you're basically doing all these different types of photography, but all surrounded in the Venn diagram of what you love to do. So I never get bored with it. I can do anything photo wise and love it. And I love just creating. And when you take that picture, you look at the back of the camera or you look at the film or whatever, and you're just like, oh my God, I can't believe I created that. I love having those moments. And even this late in my career, they're still happening.
That's awesome. I look at your work too and say, "Oh my God, I can't believe you created that." So I can only imagine the impact that
Thank
you
you.
have. At what point did you want to transition from concert photography to doing portraiture, magazine covers, album covers, and more of the commercial side of it?
So, in a selfish way, and I'll explain this, I'm a collector. I'm that kid who sat outside the bus with a stack of CDs to get signed. I have thousands upon thousands of DVDs, Funkos, all sorts of stuff. I've always had that collector mentality. So when I was behind the barricade as a fan, I saw all these photographers in front of me. I'm like, oh, it'd be really cool to have photos from this show that I created myself because it's kind of like a little collectible memorabilia from that show that no one else has. So I started doing that, and I'm like, oh, you know what? All of these other photographers next to me are getting kind of the same thing. I see this other photographer doing a photo shoot with a band. That's something that's super unique only to them. How do I do that? And I figured it out. But I really think when you get into the portraiture side of things rather than concerts, you're in more control. You're creating the lighting, you're creating the posing. When you're shooting a concert, it's just chaos of you capturing whatever's in front of you when you can capture it. You're not controlling the lighting, you're not controlling the subject. So it's just a different way of doing things for sure. But that's certainly one of the first things I got into. And knowing that magazines, as I was working for magazines, they were looking for more portrait work than live photography. And you'll see now in any music magazine, there's not much concert photography in there. It's mostly portraiture. So if I wanted to continue going as a career, I knew I needed to learn that stuff. And that's everything I learned at Hallmark.
Did it help that you were a musician rather than just some fan that wanted to break into it? Does it help having that other side of the curtain checked off?
Absolutely. Especially when shooting concerts, timing, counts, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, when certain things are going to hit, when the chorus is going to hit. When the chorus hits, there's probably going to be more white lighting, you get better shots. Timing in concert photography is a lot. And if you watch the lighting, an LD is pressing, these 4 buttons, and when the lighting you want is going to hit. Not necessarily your subject will be where you want them to be, but if you watch the lighting, you can get an idea of, oh, this is when the blue's going to hit. This is when the yellow's going to hit. It definitely helps for sure. And then if you're shooting instruments, knowing like, hey, bring the headstock this way, bring the pickups towards your head, bring the body out toward the light a little bit. Knowing the bits and pieces of every instrument is definitely helpful.
Yeah, it's something that you never think about with concert photography. I think everybody thinks you just stand up in the pit, or if you're lucky enough to get on stage and you're just firing away. But having that knowledge can go such a long way towards what you were just talking about, not having the same photos as everybody else and kind of making your mark. There's a ton of concert photographers out there. There's a ton of music photographers, but how do you take what you're doing so it's no matter what kind of image? Because look, you have a range of images. It's not just one style, but I know when I look at your work, it's your work.
So are you asking like how I get that kind of look, that kind of feel?
Yeah. So as far
Um,
as like doubling down on kind of that preparation that goes into it, is it just something that do you really look to set yourself apart? Are you just out there like a kid living his dream and you just happen to see things from a certain perspective because you're involved in that music?
I think in terms of your look and your style, I think that just develops naturally the more you shoot, the more you kind of hone in on what you like and what you like to do. And then in terms of preparing for a shoot or preparing for a show, I think the more you shoot, the more you kind of get an idea of what you like, what you don't like, what works, what doesn't work, what venues have what kind of lighting. You'll know what to bring and what to shoot to make it look the way you want it to look. I think that just goes with the more you shoot, the better you'll get at doing what you do.
Now, moving it towards obviously having more control with doing shoots, is that something I feel like you're the type of person that's more comfortable with the control you have? Some people just some people are better at recognizing a scene and taking an image of it than creating that scene. I feel like in your work, I get a feel of you're going in there with an expressed vision. You have an idea of what you want to do. You're great at creating a scene, and you look like you have fun with it and doing your images. Is that fair to say?
I absolutely have fun. It's definitely not always me controlling everything. Sometimes most of the time it's very collaborative.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's a band coming to me with an idea of like, hey, we want to do this, this, and this. Can you Jeremy Saffer that? And I know what they mean by that. It's like, yeah, of course. I can light it and direct it and make it happen. But it's definitely not always super directive. I think with younger bands and some bands who aren't, very posy. I don't know the word for that, but you're definitely directing everything, moving the lighting, doing all those kind of things. And other times, bands kind of know how they look, they know how to pose. Like for example, Ghost, the band Ghost.
Mhm.
Tobias knows what he looks like in everything and knows how to pose. He knows how to find the light. He knows all of that kind of stuff. And it's so easy to work with someone like that because you don't really have to pose beyond like, chin down, turn your face this way a little bit, chin up a little bit, those kind of like micro adjustments. Other bands are like, we don't know what to do. What do we do with our hands? And you have to kind of really get in there and give a lot of direction to get it to where you want it to be.
And you're comfortable with both. You're comfortable kind of stepping back and somebody, letting somebody else take the reins and say, okay, I know what my angles are. I know what I want out of this, or taking full control.
I'm a very directive kind of person. I will direct pretty hard when I'm shooting. I'm always, saying, chin up, chin down, move your body this way, move your body that way. I never want to take the same photo twice because that gets kind of, too much to go through, too boring.
Mhm.
So even if someone very much knows what they look like, knows what they want, I'm still giving micro directions here and there to make the adjustments so they're hitting the lighting the way they should. Um, I would never not direct, if that makes sense. But I'm
Okay.
definitely open to artists who are like, hey, I don't like the way I look when I do this. I like the way I look when I do this. And that's again why you show them back of camera and they can see what's going on and get an idea for what it looks like and their input. And then, okay, you don't like this. The way I can make this look work is by bringing this light up here or moving this light over there. Let me do that real quick and we'll move forward.
Now, as far as visual inspirations, was there something growing up, or I mean, I feel like album covers, when I look back at like growing up in music, it was like album covers was everything. Album art, especially metal albums. Metal albums, like opened up the CD and the first thing you did was look through the art on the inside. Was there anything that jumps out to you as far as whether it's a band, a particular album, or a photographer of the time that is you see as a major inspiration for your work and your own vision?
Well, I definitely grew up with Ross Halfin all over my walls because I was a big Metallica nerd when I was younger. But I didn't look at him as, okay, this is Ross Halfin, this amazing photographer, because I was looking at it from like a musician point of view and a
Mhm.
fan point of view rather than, photography point of view. I feel like I didn't really get into the photography view of things until I was like 18, 19, around there when I was getting really, really into it. Even when I first started shooting concerts, I was just a fan with a camera. I mean, that's how all concert photographers and music photographers start. We're fans with cameras. I mean, we still are,
Mhm.
right? Um, but the first kind of inspiration I saw, the things that always inspire me are the things I see and I don't understand how they did it. And for me, like photo wise, when I first started learning who photographers were, David LaChapelle was the one where I would see his work and I'm like, how? How did he do this? How can I figure out how to do this? And I haven't, but you know, but definitely there was a lot of album covers as well that definitely visually inspired me. I did a whole book based on, the inspiration of black metal album covers. And yeah, for sure, there's none that really stick out as like, oh my God, I know Cradle of Filth for sure was one of those bands that definitely inspired imagery for me.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and definitely a lot of movies, a lot of the darker movies like The Crow for sure. The lighting, the lack of saturation, the selective coloring in that, the color grading in that, amazing stuff like that for sure.
Mhm. Now, I want to talk about your lighting. It was only a matter of time before we went there because lighting is such a key component. We see all the lights there behind you. Can you talk a little bit about the types of lights you use, um, when you're using certain lights. I know you're one of the people that can take those pavo tubes behind you, incorporate them into the shot. And I think we talk about lighting so much as an off-camera thing, but when you're incorporating into the shot, you have such cool creative uses of the lighting. Can you talk a little bit about your stance on that?
Thanks. So lighting wise, I use strobe and I use LED, but LEDs are relatively new for me. I started using LEDs during the pandemic. In terms of tubes, ever since starting using them, I haven't done a shoot without them. I just love their look. I love what they can do. And the great thing is you can use them in frame as not just a light source, but a prop in the actual, photo. Like the new In This Moment album cover that dropped last week. That's all Pavo tubes. Those things are great.
Awesome.
But yeah, strobes are great in certain lighting conditions. Tubes, LEDs are great in other lighting conditions. I kind of use them both for most shoots. There's very rarely I'll do a shoot where I use only one of the two. I very rarely mix them. Very rarely will I use a strobe with LEDs bled in with a lower shutter speed or anything like that. But yeah, I like to try anything, everything I can try and see what I can implement into my kit and bring on set and use. And now it's like, I'll show up with 20 something tubes, four strobes, a couple cobs, a couple flats, just way too much stuff. I'd rather have it and not need it.
Totally. I was going to ask you, I was like, it looks like it's pretty light intensive on a lot of the stuff. And I figured you carried a pretty big bag around.
Absolutely. I mean, I was a person who the first like 15, 16 years of my photography was, all my shoots were 3 to 4 strobes at the most. I very rarely used 5 or 6 ever. I always had them, but I used to keep it just so simple. And now I'm doing these sets that have, 20 something lights. And to be fair, those are mostly tubes. When I'm using like a lot of lights, a lot of those are tubes. But it's crazy going from something where I'm used to just having, 3 or 4 lights at the most to having 20 something lights
Do you
for
do you
sure.
do you find that you go for more lights? Or some people are super minimal. I, for one, I do a lot of stuff with one light. I kind of start
Mhm.
there, and if I'll incorporate more light as I need. Do you start simple, or do you like to say, "Hey, I want to see what I can create. I have this grand idea."
I like to start simple. I usually start with what I call an icebreaker set, no matter what the shoot is. But there are oftentimes I do photo shoots where like I have 2 minutes with a band between their dressing room and stage. And that's one of those situations where you light it, you get it all set, you do your test shots, and you get what you get within those 2 minutes, and you better nail that shot. So that's the only time I won't really experiment too much. But when I'm doing a full shoot with a band, the first set I always do is kind of a safe 3 light set, something that they can't really mess up depending on posing and whatnot. And it's really easy to nail a couple great photos with that lighting. And then I'll get more intricate from there. And I always tell them that. I walk my subjects through the shoot. I always say, look, we're going to start with this. As we go, we're going to get more intricate with the lighting. Then we're going to bring in tubes. We're going to add fog. We're going to do this, this, and this. Walking them through it so they have an idea of what's going on is always really important, but I usually won't start with a super, super intricate set with tons of lights other than, those times where, hey, this is what we want. Like, again, going back to that In This Moment set where they're like, this is what we want. And it started off that way. And that was the entire shoot. The lighting didn't change. It was always all of those lights.
Now I want to go back to the away from the gear and back to the band thing, because it's a natural question when you're shooting celebrities or musicians or people that you looked up to. A lot of us fear it because we don't, they say don't meet your heroes. Was this ever something that was like, oh, do I really want to go into this? Do I want to meet the people I look up to? Is that a real conversation or a real thought that pops into your head when you start to ascend in your career and getting to the point where hey, I'm photographing people that I've always been inspired by?
For me, it was the exact opposite of that. I was more excited to meet the people that I grew up worshiping than worried about that would ruin whatever magic exists between not knowing them. And there's certainly been very, very, very few situations where there's been any sort of disappointment here and there. But anytime there was, I kind of go with that, I have a bad day, you have a bad day, everyone has their bad days. I'll give them 3 strikes. If they're mean to me 3 times in a row, I'm done with that person. But in most instances, it's okay, this person had a bad day and they were amazing to me the next time we crossed paths and did a photo shoot or whatever else. Um, it definitely wasn't a concern of mine, but it's very awesome to, have that game face on while you're shooting your favorite musician in front of you. And what you're creating is something that could have been on your wall when you were a kid. And you're like, oh, okay, so full circle moment. I'm seeing my photos on the walls of, younger fans, photographers, like Ray Ripley, the wrestler. She posted a photo of her as a kid and with all her wall plastered in photos. And I had something like 10 or 15 photos on her wall. And that's a really cool thing. And I know that kind of imagery inspired her current imagery that she uses, in WWE, and seeing photographers inspired by those photos, and, being able to create the photos I had on my walls, like of, Korn, Megadeth, Slayer, Metallica, Cradle of Filth, all of those bands are bands I've worked with that have had posters out of my work. So it's insane. That's kind of the, oh my God, what is my life moments?
That's awesome. And I love that perspective because I'll be honest, a lot of us, myself included, are on the other side of the coin. And I think it's so cool to look at it from like, no, this is awesome. This is everything I've dreamed about. Now I get to be the one to create the images that I grew up being inspired by, or just looking at and thinking we're cool and having a poster on the wall. It's such an awesome perspective to have. Now I'm going to go back into the gear because I want to know what you're shooting now. I know you're newer. And when I say newer, the last couple of years to the Leica world. So I want to talk about, how you got to the Leica world and what are things like on this side? Because we say street photography, photojournalism, everybody kind of has this idea of what a Leica photographer is. And for all those of you out there watching, when Leica came to me and it was like, hey, Jeremy Saffer, what do you think? I'm like, hell yeah, let's do it right away. It was the fastest yes I've ever said. Jeremy, what brought you to Leica?
So kind of a long-winded story. Randy, the singer of Lamb of God, Randy Blythe, amazing photographer. All of you should check out his work. He's also a Leica photographer. When he first got into photography, I would see him quite often. He would ask me like, yo, so can you show me this lens? Can you show me this and that? He wasn't initially Leica. He was shooting, I think like Canon or Nikon, but we would nerd out about photography every single time I'd see him. He went over to Leica and I was Canon, up until the pandemic. I basically went into the pandemic shooting what I shot and came out of it shooting nothing that I shot pre-pandemic. New camera system, new lighting system, new types of lighting. Yeah, for me, the pandemic was actually a good thing because I could actually slow down and test lighting, do test shots, do all that kind of stuff. Because I don't have time. That doesn't exist anymore now that I'm working. It's shoot, edit, shoot, edit, shoot, edit. So anyways, Randy introduced me to Alan at the Leica store in Boston, who basically was like, hey, anytime you want to try out a Leica, hit me up. We'd love to have you. We have a great educational base. We have all this. It'd be great to show that Leica, can be for concert photographers, portrait photographers. The SL system is great for portraits. We want to show that it's for everyone. It's not just this, doctors, lawyers, street photographers kind of thing. We want to show it's for concert photographers, portrait photographers. Let's get you a Leica. And so I was kind of at this point where I was doing more education stuff. I do tons of workshops. I have plenty coming up, and having a better support system with education stuff was the main reason I was like, okay, I'll try Leica. So I was sent a Leica. I shot it against the 1DX, which is what I was shooting the past decade or so. And then I got a Sony A7R4 and a Nikon, I forget which Nikon it was. And I was basically of the mentality that the Leica look wasn't real. It was like, okay, yeah, these people go on about this Leica look. You can definitely edit a photo to look like that. There's editing. That's what exists. It's very easy to press a button and make it look like a Leica. Then I shot the Leica, and yeah, the Leica look is real for sure. it was a harrowing positive experience shooting the Leica, because I looked at the back of camera, and a lot of what I do I don't consider art. Concert photography isn't always art. Portraits aren't always art. Sometimes it's just commercial content. And I hate the word content creator. I never use that, but I look at the photo on the back of a Leica. I look at it on my computer. I'm like, this is art. This is what it's supposed to look like. This is incredible. And even recently I shot an SL2 against or SL2S against the A7R4, and it's just, oh my God, it's light years ahead. Like the noise that I got from the Sony versus the Leica, it's like the Leica just left it light years behind. And it's just that look that Leica has is so good. I could never switch ever again if I ever wanted to, because I want my photos to look like they look when I take them on a Leica. They're it's amazing. And my main camera, SL2S 2490, also Leica, getting that extra 20 millimeters in there is awesome for shooting bands, because you can do, a shot of, 6, 8, 9 members with this lens, and then also get a shot of someone's face with the same lens, with just a step forward and zooming in, and you're there. It's awesome. So
Do you shoot do you
that's
shoot
my main
video
right there.
on that at all? Any video
I
that you shoot on that?
Yeah, I shot a music video for In This Moment called As Above, So Below. And that's actually when I was trying it out. And I was shooting it again with the Sony and with a Canon to see what worked best. And I ended up shooting that with that lens, I believe, the 2490 with the SL2. And yeah, that's the only video I've shot with it thus far. But yeah, the video quality is incredible as well. It still has that look to it, which is awesome.
Is it pretty much the same experience as shooting the stills? Because I've heard that the video on the SL2S it's more rooted in like a cinematic feel. It's more, it feels like closer to shooting an RE camera than it does shooting just your regular old mirrorless camera that you're used to.
As a photographer who barely knows how to shoot videos yet shoots music videos anyway, I can tell you I have no idea. I
That's
can
an
tell you, next to the Canon, which I wasn't shooting on the 1DX because it doesn't do video. I think I was shooting on a 5D
mhm.
Mark III or something like that. Uh, it was fairly similar. It wasn't difficult for me to do it as someone who does not shoot music videos, but somehow does shoot music videos. But to be fair, like I don't shoot a lot of music videos. They're very, very few and far between. And yeah, I'm definitely a photographer
Is that
more
something
than
like
anything else.
you're big into film, right? You're a big movie guy. Is that something that you see, whether it's music videos, diving deeper into music videos, or getting into film? Or are you happy where you're at with still photography?
I love still photography. I love photography. I don't think I could ever be a music video guy. Just the post in that alone is just not something I want to deal with. If I could shoot it, hand it off to someone else to edit, maybe. But I did have one experience where I didn't even shoot a music video, I just directed it, which was an interesting experience where you have, a CO, a lighting person, all those people in there who do all the jobs I usually do myself. Like I don't have a grip, I don't have a lighting person. I have an assistant who's amazing, but I kind of just do everything myself. So having a team of everybody else doing everything and me just saying, do this was really interesting. I could see myself directing a little bit more, but in
Really?
terms of shooting and editing, no.
What
Editing
was it like?
video is,
What was it like to give up that control? I mean, especially as photographers, I feel like still photographers, we have such control because we can do most of what we need in most circumstances. We can be that jack of all trades. But when you get into directing, it's like you just said it, you've handed your camera off. You can kind of just point and yell and direct. And what was it like to give up creative control in a certain sense?
it was kind of like I was doing a photo shoot, but didn't have the camera in my hands, because I'm always giving directions. I'm always giving a lot of directions. I'm very verbal, and I'm always like chin up, chin down, move this way, click. Okay, move this way, click, move this way. I'm always kind of firing off directions, kind of rapid fire. So to me, it kind of came naturally. It was weird not having a camera in my hand and doing it, but it was shot on like this insane red camera. I don't know how to use those things. And lighting wise, the lighting was more simplistic than the stuff I usually use. So it was really easy to know what they had and tell them exactly what I wanted. Because usually when someone hires me to do a music video, it's we want your look that you get in photography, but a video. Actually, that's every single video I've ever done was that. It's we want your look, but we want it to be a video. So it's very easy to see the lighting and say, okay, do this, and this, because that's what I do. And then here's how I want you to shoot it and go. and tell the band what to do.
Do you prefer, if you had to pick, and they said, look, Jeremy, you can either go over here and you can direct and you're gonna get the same vision, or you can be the guy behind the camera? What do you think does it more for you?
I would like to be behind the camera for sure. I like having that control, but as long as I'm not doing the post, I'm good.
Post is always the worst, especially with video. We did have a question come in. I want to throw this out there because I know a lot of people, even if they're not asking it or thinking it, getting into music photography, you want to make a living, you want to get paid. Is there any advice you have for people who want to do any kind, whether it's concert photography or like stuff you're doing? Any advice for the people who want to do that, want to make a living doing it?
Absolutely. First of all, do it. Second, start with small bands, start with local bands, start with, situations where you can take your camera into a venue where you don't need a photo pass, like small bars, whatever, and start shooting as much as you can, develop those relationships with those bands, and those bands sometimes open up for bigger bands, and that's how you kind of move your way up. You build your portfolio, you start applying to magazines, hitting up magazines and outlets saying, hey, here's my portfolio of work I do, I would love to work with you and shoot some bigger bands. And you just kind of snowball from there and just keep growing and growing. And that's the best way to get into it, I'd say. Just building your portfolio, submitting to magazines and outlets, hitting up bands when you can, saying, hey, like, this is what I do, here's my work, here's what I'd like to do. If you don't have an outlet and you want to shoot concerts, you want to shoot bands, reach out to the publicist. Every now and again, a publicist will hook up a photographer who's working on their portfolio. They're a student, they're breaking into the industry, they don't have an outlet. Every now and again, they'll have the ability to give that person a photo pass so they can kind of build on what they have, which is always great. There's some amazing publicists out there I work with who definitely look at young photographers and try to help them out as well. But yeah, just shoot as much as you can, get into it, love it, have fun. And I do workshops and seminars and have a Patreon all based on, photo education, how to break into the business, how to get published, how to make a living doing those things. And I will say concert photography is more difficult to make a living in unless you're touring. If you're touring, that's not easy to get unless you have a working relationship with the band or band trusts you enough to have you essentially live with them in their house for a month. And the way that builds is you shoot them locally, they see your work, they love your work, they take you out. But portraiture, doing photo shoots with bands, that's always needed. They need album covers, they need exclusives for every magazine, they need magazine work, they need editorial stuff, they need commercial stuff, they need photo shoots with their instruments, they need all of that kind of stuff.
Great advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Try to get into the portraiture side should you want, but concerts, it's difficult to make a living unless you're touring, but it's fun, it's awesome. Try to do both if you can. That's what I do. It's fun.
That's awesome. Now you're so busy all the time. When do you ever have time for personal projects? Do you do any personal projects, or do you have anything that keeps you from getting burnt out?
Yeah, I mean, I do personal projects in between the times I'm doing mostly assignment and band work, which is, I'd say 90% of what I do. Like I had a project I shot kind of back burner whenever I had the time to for 13 years that finally came out as a book in 2020. I'm shooting a follow-up to that now. I'm doing a band photo book where it's going to be the stories behind the shoots and, the shots that are alternate takes, behind the scenes, all that kind of stuff as a book, which will be great. And I started shooting a lot of film, a lot of instant film too. So I have like the Mint cameras, the lomographies. I'm shooting a Mamiya TLR, all of the Polaroids I can possibly get my hands on. Just getting back into film, which is what I started on. I started on a Mamiya medium format film camera. The Mamiya 645 AFD is what I started on at Hallmark before I went digital. So getting back to those roots is really cool, and getting to shoot those kind of things, not just with personal projects, but like when I did the shoot with Lily from Him, the Static X photo shoot, the In This Moment photo shoots, the Motionless in White photo shoots, I'll bring those cameras with me and make sure I do a couple instant photos, a couple film photos, just changing it up. So I'm also, while I'm doing assignment work, while I'm doing work that is work, you can call it work all you want. I love it. I can do that all day, every day, and very rarely be not stoked about it. I'm also doing personal stuff within that. And a lot of my personal work is, okay, I'm friends with this person in the band and we're going to do a photo shoot for fun. It's not for a magazine cover. It's not for an album cover. It's not for anything other than we like to create. And I have so many people in bands and that I work with, work wise, that we can do those personal projects. Like I did a whole book with Ash from New Year's Day just because of a tweet, just kind of a tweet she made kind of snowballed into, ooh, let's do a photo shoot of this. Wait, let's do a calendar of this. Wait, let's do a book of this. And then, we spent 10 days creating like this comedic Addams Family gory horror book. And we just put it out. We just rolled with it.
That's
So I
awesome.
think if you find that you love what you do, you're not so worried about personal time because that's what could be better than doing what you love. What could be better than seeing your friends succeed that you have in bands, seeing them go from like these small clubs to these giant arenas, watching them just absolutely kill it, blow up, get huge, and just succeed. And you're there to create and kind of help with their visual legacy. And you get to be a part of that in creating that. Like, it's work. Don't get me wrong, that's totally work. It can be stressful, it can be a lot, it can be exhaustion on every level, but I love it. And yeah, it doesn't stress me out not having a lot of time to just do nothing because I'd rather be doing something and I'd rather be doing what I do.
That's awesome. It's so refreshing to hear somebody who loves what they do, especially in the arts. We talk about burnout and we talk about hitting this plateau where you're like, all right, well, I don't know where I want to go from here, or I'm bored with what I'm doing, so I got to change things up. But it seems like there's so much passion for what you do, and it's got to help that you get to shoot cool stuff all the time, cool people who are just all over the place as far as creativity, from one side of the spectrum to the other. That's got to help keep you engaged in what you're doing, because it's always something different. As it's the same as far as, yes, you're doing music, you're doing musicians, but it's all over the place, right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I certainly stick to certain genres. Like, I can't imagine myself shooting a lot of country stars just because it's not within my world. I don't know that world. I know the dark and scary, the metal, the rock. That's like what I grew up loving, what I live in. So I know there's probably way more money in country and pop and all the stuff that would take the passion of out of what I do. So like you said, that burnout, that getting bored, that's what happened to me as a musician where it sucked the passion away from me. And I haven't like I have my guitars, I have my drum set, I have that stuff, but I haven't played in a band. I haven't written any music in 20 years because I basically put down my guitar and picked up a camera and the camera replaced it, you know,
Mm.
entirely. Like that musical knowledge is out of my head now, and I can give you the photo knowledge. But it's very important that when you feel you're getting to a point where you're burning out, you're getting to a point where you feel the passion kind of draining from you, take a break and change up what you're doing. For me, it's as simple as like a new piece of equipment to change things up, switching over, shooting instant photography, shooting film, getting a new, like going tag sailing and finding this awesome film camera, grabbing film for it, shooting it, and seeing what comes of it, like that kind of stuff. Always having those other things you can kind of divert to is very important because you never want to burn out. You never want to lose your passion for what you love to do. Because that's happened to me with music. And I think photography is easier for me than music. Like I said when we were chatting earlier, I can shoot anything photo wise, especially in the music world, because it's event photography, it's portraiture, it's commercial photography, editorial, journalistic. It's everything. Uh, so I don't get bored with it because I can always kind of shift what I'm doing to continue shooting the same thing, and it's still shooting it differently.
That's awesome. We're gonna get into some images here, Jeremy. So if you guys stay in just a minute. There we go. We'll get some images up here. And I just want you to talk us through these. I don't know if there's, any stories behind some of the images, or what you like about this selection of images. So talk us through these.
Absolutely. So this is one of my favorite bands to work with, Avatar. They're actually on the cover of the current issue of Outburn that came out like last week, I want to say, like a few days ago. So I just did a new photo shoot with them that just came out. They're an amazing band to work with. They're very animated. Obviously, working with bands that have an aesthetic, that have a look, you'll get something a little bit cooler than bands that aren't as, image forward or image centric.
Mhm.
So for this shot, this was a big shoot I did for them for the cover of a magazine that never came out. And actually, the outburn that just came out was kind of the, hey, we finally did it. We finally got it, which was great. They have these lights, these kind of like Christmassy lights that they had all over their stage for that set. And they brought it out for a shot. And they're like, hey, what do you think about lighting just using these? It's, yeah, absolutely. Let's make it happen. And kind of wrapped it around themselves. Johannes, who's the singer, always has a big expression while everyone else is kind of more stoic. And that's kind of all of the shoots. But we've done so many shoots together, like probably 10 at this point, where they just know how I work. I know how they work. And this is one of my favorite shots. It's something that wasn't shot with any of the lighting I use. It was just those string lights. And it's just such a cool shot with so many different colors in there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now you said earlier, Jeremy, just in general of knowing the cadences and stuff about music itself makes it easier for concert photography. Now for shooting images like this, where you're shooting either promo, cover, magazine images, I can imagine it would help greatly the fact that you know the bands, you love the music, to know something about them and kind of have an idea of who they are going into it. Does that help with how you set up in your mind the images?
I think it's very important to research the bands you're photographing and knowing something about them. There's some times where I'm thrown a photo shoot, don't have the time to look up the band, and I go into it not totally blind. I always kind of have some sort of idea, but I don't have the time to like learn everybody's name or anything like that. But I'll have an idea of what they sound like, what their look is, what would make sense for their look. Like I wouldn't take, I mean, it'd be funny to do, but I wouldn't take this like evil, brooding black metal band that's usually shot in a dark location and take them out to a field of flowers for a photo shoot. Like now that I say that, I would love to do that, but I know they probably wouldn't. So it's really important having an idea of their look and how you can take what you do and further their look. Because the best thing you can do with a band and your work is make it so it moves forward and you're adding to their visual legacy rather than just creating something that's going to be forgotten about. That's what's really important for sure.
All right,
So
talk us
this
through
shot
this
is
image.
this is Chris from Motionless in White, and I've done so many photo shoots with that band. I actually did a photo shoot with them last week, last week, with Chris and Maria from In This Moment together, and that photo should be out soon. So Chris is someone I've worked with time and time and time again. We've done plenty of personal projects. This one was actually for a magazine. I believe it was Outburn. This is in a little hallway behind the backstage of the Palladium in Worcester, which is where I do like 60% of my shoots. Love that place. And I just wanted to get something different. We were doing so much stuff that was just on a background in a studio location. So shooting on these stairs, having those leading lines going up, and it just kind of keeps going up and up. So I set a light up at the top of the stairs pointing down to add that lighting behind them. So you'd have that like slice of red. There's a light down the stairs pointing up. So you have the light on the ceiling over there. So it wasn't just him in the stairs and darkness behind him. And yeah, that's the shot. And like I said, Chris is someone I've worked with time and time again. And the more you work with someone, the more you have an idea of what they like, what they don't like, what they're into lighting wise, what they're not into. And that makes it so much easier to shoot with a band. And that's not always the case where you're working with someone you've worked with, again and again and again. But thankfully, like I get to work with a lot of bands oftentimes in a repeat situation. So knowing his posing, knowing how he works, him knowing how I work makes those shoots so much easier to get done. So
Lovely
this was a
stuff.
cool shoot. Yeah. Alice Cooper. This is actually a crop of a full body shot. So this was the first shoot I did with Alice, and this was in Northampton at the Calvin, and I want to say it was like early 2010, somewhere around there. And I knew we had to get the shoot done before a certain time because he had a tee time that day. He was playing golf that day. So unlike a lot of other shoots where you go in and the band's kind of like, okay, let's get this over with. We have to get this done. Let's move. Let's get it done. And the crew is just like, oh, they have a photo shoot. When I got on stage and we shot it on the stage with my lights and Alice was there, His entire crew was like, what do you need? What do you need to stay at? Do you want the snake? Do you want the guillotine? Do you want this? Do you want that? They were so kind and so helpful and so awesome. And at one point, they're like, do you want the snake? And I'm like, yeah, please get the snake. So we did a bunch of shots of him with the snake. And at one point, it started coming towards the lens and stuck its tongue out at just the right time. And like, you can't replicate this photo. It was just that perfect timing. And Alice, everything you hear about him being the kindest person, nicest person on earth, absolutely true. Nicest dude on earth. He's awesome. So yeah, this was just one of those perfect shots. I was able to crop in, and I forget the name of the program that existed like a decade ago, where it would rebuild pixels for you so you could have it larger. But that's what I used to make it look the way it looks here, because it was literally like 5% of a photo, and I was able to crop in and make it work. So yeah, and one of my favorite photos of all time for sure. What an icon. What a legend, you know?
Totally. Totally. I mean, that's got to be one of those shots where you're just like, oh my God, I can't believe I just shot Alice Cooper.
Absolutely. This is Christina from Lacuna Coil, someone I work with quite often as well. Actually, my first photo shoot I ever did my entire career of a band was Lacuna Coil. And that was 20 years ago this August. Um, so Christina's someone I create with quite often. And this was, they had an off date or they had 2 days off. And so I just picked her up from wherever she was. We went out thrift stores and she grabbed a couple things. Then we went to my studio and did a day of shooting. And this is with some sort of like umbrella she had behind her. And yeah, it was just one of those things where it lined up perfectly. She did her pose. We shot all day and we got tons of looks that day. We did something like 10 or 15 different looks. And this is one of my favorite photos from that set. And again, it's one of those situations where she knows how I work. I know how she works. I know what she likes. She knows what I like. And we're able to create these amazing images that we both love so easily.
Now, with somebody like that, Jeremy, do you find yourself? I mean, you kind of joked earlier, I would never bring a dark metal band out into a field of flowers. Do you ever sit there and think of an idea and say, oh, you know what, this would be such a badass idea for X, and reach out or kind of say, hey, I kind of have a vision for a shoot with you guys. I would love to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I'll have an idea of something that, like, if, for example, if I had an idea of something that's very horror based, very scary, brutal, lots of blood and gore, the first person I'm hitting up is Spencer from Ice Nine Kills, because that's their aesthetic. If I have this new piece of equipment that I want to use for something, I'll hit up someone and say, hey, here's my idea. I want to shoot it with you. Let me know what you think. And that's happened time and time again. Like, when I was shooting Canon, I got the 85 1.2 lens in the same day Suicide Silence was playing in Worcester. And, I was texting back and forth with their singer, who is a very, very close friend of mine before he passed. And he was just like, dude, you got a new lens? Bring it up. Let's test it out. I was like, hell yeah, please. Can I bring a light? Can I bring this? Can I bring that? It's like, hell yeah, we'll do it up. And we did like a bunch of shooting that day. And the iconic kind of soft photo of him that's out there with kind of that brown hue to it is from that day, from just a text message of, hey, I got this new lens. Cool. Get up here,
Awesome.
Yeah. So Doyle, one of the most iconic looking human beings on earth and just the nicest dude as well. He's so awesome. So with Doyle, just having that lighting from above and the chin down and the deep set eyes, but still having, shooting that on a white paper background, knowing the light's shooting straight down, it's going to bounce up and fill in the eyes so they don't go pure black. And that was just like the most Doyle shot you can get. And Doyle's another person who, again, we've worked together so much that I can say like, hey, I have this idea for something with you. What do you think about doing this? And yeah, he's down always. He's always down to create. Very, very cool guy. Very awesome dude to work with.
So awesome. There we go. We got to check in on my boss right now, Carrie and Corey.
Yeah.
She's probably on the floor right now, not breathing. So somebody check on her over there.
So she hates both of those bands?
She loves she's probably over there screaming. The B&H office, somebody's like screaming. It's going crazy right now for sure.
So this was
I know there's a story behind this one, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I was hired by Revolver to photograph Greg, who did the artwork for the cover of Revolver. Greg does like Spawn, Greg Capullo, he does Batman, he does all the comic art. And so I was tasked to go to his place and shoot him, creating these things. And then we did a secondary profile shoot of him as well. And when it came out, I guess Carrie was like, you know what? I should have looked tougher in that. Let's redo it. Let's do it as a photo shoot. And so I got hit up to recreate this. Maria Ferrero of Adrenaline actually hit me up. She was like, hey, they're coming through to New York. Can you go down and do this shoot? You're the one who can nail this. Absolutely. So I get to the venue, and all I need is a black wall. Doesn't exist inside the venue or anywhere around the venue. So I'm like asking anybody. And the janitor's like, well, there is this hallway past the boiler room over here, in this, obscure part of the venue. And we found it. And I needed it to match the drawn cover. And so I was doing solo shots with both of them, and then this shot of them, and then them and Greg together. As I was doing the solo shots of Corey, Carrie starts walking down the stairs to the area, and Corey's like, "Oh, got to do my push-ups." Starts doing push-ups, and Carrie's like, "I'm gonna kick your ass," and Corey's like, "Oh yeah, I'll kick your ass," just back and forth banter the entire shoot, which was so funny, and then we did this shot, and it emulated the cover perfectly, where it was exactly as drawn, and that's what they rolled with.
So it's always great when there's an equally good story behind a great image.
All right, so this is in this moment who I work with a lot, and I think if I'm not mistaken, since like 2015, 16, somewhere around there, I've been the only photographer to work with them doing photo shoots. I just did their new album cover that came out last week. I just did a new shoot with them last week that's coming out, and we have another shoot in the books coming up. So always working with these guys, and always amazing to work with these guys, because Maria is one of those people who has a very, very strong vision of what she wants. So she'll say, hey, this is what I want to do. Can you Jeremy Saffer that? Like, yeah, okay, cool. And yeah, I did their last album cover as well with the nan lights in the album cover with the red triangle. So for this one, it was one of those situations where we were shooting in this little small upstairs of the Palladium. Again, a lot of my shoots are there. And just using a single light from above with a 47-inch grand box to spread the light over everybody. And she has the idea, she'll tell the band what to do. She'll like say like, bring your hands up like this, do this with your hands. Jeremy, now fix it, so they'll like bring it up, and then I'll micro adjust it so it looks the way it should look, the way she wants it to look. And yeah, this is just one of those photos from that set.
So
Ghost, one of my favorite bands to work with, because that dude knows how he looks, and he knows how to look awesome in everything. So this was a situation where we were doing a shoot in California, and it was supposed to be like an hour shoot, and it ended up being like a 14 or 15-hour shoot, something like that, because they were shooting all of their video content for the new album, including a Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon, I forget, one of the two appearances they were shooting that night. They were shooting their album release ritual, which was like, them playing a bunch of songs live, all that kind of stuff. And so the first set we did was down this hallway with a lot of beautiful light coming in, and just shooting with that natural light and getting that menacing look of Papa Emeritus, just doing what he does best, looking awesome straight towards the lens and getting those leading lines going straight forward. Just that natural light bouncing against the other side and bouncing a little light back is just perfect. Yeah, he's amazing to work with. Such a good dude. And we like all of the same bands. So anytime I have a go shoot, I know I'm going to have a good chat of like, oh, what have you been listening to lately? Oh, you need to check this out. Oh, you need to check this out,
we're gonna have to have you drop some recommendations before we let you go today. I gotta build up my catalog over here. I need some new bands.
No problem. So this was the same day. This was down a different hallway in the mausoleum, and just getting this awesome shot of all of the band members in there where they're kind of in shadow. You can kind of see them, but you kind of can't, giving it more of a horror kind of vibe. And the idea when we were shooting there is to make sure you can't see any of the names or any of the, intricate like glasswork that they have there, and just want to see the marble and the floor and some of the ceiling. And we nailed this using a 4 light setup. This is 1 light on a background stand pointing up, giving that light behind them and giving shape to the ghouls in the back. 2 lights at a 45-degree angle on the sides pointing this way. You can see that with the leading lines in their feet. And then 1 light from above and just shooting hard light. So you really have that fall off on the sides. You really have that light kind of vignetting naturally on the sides, which is great. And then obviously with the edit, I went a little matte with it so it wouldn't go pure black because I thought that would bring out a little bit more of the shape and details.
I was just going to ask you about that because I noticed the blacks are a little flatter here. And the first thing I thought was, how much of the final product do you have envisioned in pre-production or while you're shooting?
The only time I'm thinking of post when I'm doing a shoot is, oh no, I need to fix that. I'm going to have to fix that because I don't have enough background, or, oh no, I know I have light stands here that are going to have to be edited out. But I never shoot anything with the specific intent of editing it in post ever, because I hate editing. So I try to get it right in camera, which was like what was nailed into our brains at Hallmark, get it right in camera, get it right in camera, get it right in camera. And that's the big thing, not to be like the Leica guy, but switching over to Leica cut down my editing so significantly. Like, oh my God, the amount of editing I don't have to do because I shoot Leica is just game changer. Like, oh my
if you
God.
haven't used it, yeah, you got to go out there and try one out. It really, Jeremy and I were trying to explain it. We were talking before we went on camera. You can't really explain. You just got to get one in your hand, borrow one, rent one, try it out and see.
Absolutely. I mean, they go on and on about the Leica look and how that's not a real thing. The first time I took a shot and looked down and was like, this is art. This is the Leica look. Like, it exists and you can't replicate it in post. It exists when you take the photo. You don't have to do anything in post. So this is one of my most iconic photo shoots, which oddly enough was just a quick little photo shoot for a magazine. Who knew it would become this super massive thing? Because it was right before they really became this massive iconic band that thankfully they did. What a band. And I got to shoot them last year, which was great.
Oh,
They're
that's
still, I'm glad they're back. They're so good. Love my chem. So this was a shoot for a magazine called Hardcore Ink magazine, which was a tattoo and music magazine. And they mostly covered hardcore, like H2O, Madball, Terror, that kind of stuff. And I grew up in the hardcore scene, the hardcore and metal scene. So I shot a lot of hardcore bands. But I was always pitched bands that are kind of hardcore adjacent, which my chem was. They were very much a part of that world. So when they came around on Taste of Chaos, I pitched doing this big Taste of Chaos thing where I did a photo shoot with every single band on the tour, and then a big shot with everybody on the tour together with like Kevin Lyman, Killswitch Engage, My Chem, The Used. It was awesome. And so this is the shoot we did together that day. And it's actually I did a shoot for a tattoo artist as well, being that it was a hardcore ink magazine. This tattoo artist Vic Back, who was tattooing everybody on the tour. He did the Keep the Faith tour on a tattoo on Frank Iero, and then ended up becoming a friend and doing my whole sleeve. His work's amazing.
awesome. Jeremy, 15-year-old me just got a trip through time and was like geeking out inside, and 41-year-old me is still geeking out. So I want to thank you, man. This was great. It's not only great to really just hear from the artists that are creating the work that moves us, but to get inside your brain and see a little bit of behind the process is just, it's awesome.
Thank you.
Well, look at that. I'm over here. I'm like, I'm speechless. I want to just sit here for another hour looking at images and just hear you talk about them. So,
all right, let's go.
Look, man, thank you so much. This was awesome. This really was a treat for us. So to the entire Leica team, and you for making this happen. Can't thank you guys enough. To all of our viewers out there, I hope it was just as much a treat for you guys. We're here for you guys. We do it for you. We try to keep you guys on your toes and keep you guys guessing what we're going to bring you next. So huge thank you to everybody involved in this production, and especially you, Jeremy, for making it happen. We will be seeing you pretty shortly in the next couple of weeks. We will have him back on the channel here, so you guys will get to see more Jeremy. And that's all we got for you now. A huge thank you to Leica, Jeremy, and to all of you out there. But another rendition of the B&H virtual event space in the books. We'll catch y'all next time.